Good morning, everyone. It is good to be here. Hi, good to see you. And good morning to everyone who is a part of us and participating online. My name is Mike Kinman. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the rector here at All Saints Church. And I'm gonna blow it. I was thinking of a Yogi Berra line of it gets late early out there or something like that. It feels like getting out the vote and elections is something that we normally at least wait until after Labor Day to talk about. And we are, as always, living in extraordinary times. And the election cycle that we are in right now is on all of our minds, and it's weighing on all of our hearts. And this really is sort of part one is what we're doing here today, which is really talking about how do we use our sacred right to vote. We do believe absolutely that voting is a sacred duty. That is something that All Saints Church has held for a long time. We always want to be, this year we need to be a 100% voting congregation. Everyone here who is eligible to vote needs to register to vote and needs to vote so that our communal values of radical belonging, courageous justice, joyful spirituality, and ethical stewardship are a part of the national conversation. And so today we have some wonderful friends who are going to talk about resources that we're going to be providing to organize and to get organized this election cycle. That means not just you registering to vote, but being a part of making sure the souls get to the polls, which is what needs to happen this November. The second part is something that our pastoral care ministry is working on that we will be in the process of rolling out, and that's a different kind of election year toolkit. And that's how do we sustain ourselves spiritually? How do we sustain ourselves emotionally, mentally, sometimes even physically with the toll that it takes in such a highly contentious election cycle where so much is at stake? And so we're going to be providing spiritual resources that we have for individual use, but most importantly for communal use. How do we come together as a community and support each other? So we actually may have some of those conversations today, but today is primarily about how do we function and equip ourselves to be most effective at that intersection of faith and our political lives. And there is probably no one better to ground us in that conversation than Gary Hall, who is not only a dear friend of ours here at All Saints Church, but as you well know, is the former dean of Washington National Cathedral. And so you've already given Gary the welcome. Give him another welcome again. Let's do that again. Yeah. And Gary, I'm just going to hand it over to you. Just go ahead.
When in doubt, hide behind the podium, I always say. When Mike mentioned Yogi Berraisms, I was thinking, I just read a quote somewhere this week that Samuel Beckett once said he had a strong weakness for oxymorons. So that's kind of where I am. So I'm just going to say a few things, largely from my experience as a former seminary teacher at Seabury, where I was dean, at Yale Berkeley, where I was an adjunct, and then at Bloy House, where I was on the faculty in the 90s when Susan was a student there. I've thought a lot and taught a lot about Anglican theology, history, and polity. And so I've got some things to say about that, and also from my experience in Washington. And then we're just going to open up to Loren and the actual nuts and bolts of the resource from the Episcopal Church. But let me begin by saying that as a longtime member, staff person at All Saints, this is the only church I've ever worked at that doesn't make a big deal out of Mother's Day. And from which I actually am very grateful. In our family, we do not believe in greeting card holidays. And when I went to be rector of Christ Church Cranbrook, which is in a suburb of Detroit, the first Mother's Day I was there, they were handing out long-stemmed red roses to every woman who came in the building. So I went up to the head usher afterwards and I said, "That's kind of cool. What do you do on Father's Day?" And he said, "Nothing." So I got in my car in early June and drove up to Costco on Telegraph Road in Pontiac, and I bought a couple of cases of little cans of WD-40. Which I had them hand out to the men I couldn't find it. You know, the car talk guys used to say that you only need two things in a toolkit. You need duct tape if something is moving and it's not supposed to, and WD-40 if something's not moving and it's supposed to. So I wanted also to hand out little rolls of duct tape along with the WD-40, but they didn't have that. Anyway, I'm very pleased that Mother's Day, I mean, there are prayers in the liturgy for mothers this morning, and obviously it's an important day for us emotionally, but as a Methodist friend of mine once said, where he was lamenting the way in which the Methodist Church had given itself over to the culture, he said, you know, in our church, Easter is the 7th Sunday before Mother's Day. And that's kind of the way it's been. I want to start with my experience as a poll worker. When I retired from Washington in 2016, and we moved back here to the Valley, where we kept our house. And my friend Larry Dilge, who I taught with at Oakwood, and his wife Mimi Kennedy, who's an actress, some of you know, they're very much involved in Progressive Democrats for America, and they were very much involved in election protection things. And so Larry convinced me to become an LA County poll worker. And so the 2016 election, my wife Kathy and I and Mimi and Larry found ourselves in Sylmar at a union hall working the polls from 6 in the morning really, till after 8 at night. And I have to say two things about that. First of all, you all know what happened in 2016, but this union hall had no cell phone service. There was no bars, there was nothing. There was no internet, there was no Wi-Fi. And so we spent the whole day blissfully unaware of anything that was going on. But it was one of those, it was as close to a secular sacrament as I've ever seen. It was all of these folks, I speak a fair amount of Spanish, and so I was sort of one of the Spanish-speaking people at the table. And all of these people were coming in, these families were coming in, mostly Latino families, but a lot of white families as well, many black families, and some, I think, Filipino families also. It was this like multicultural civic celebration of voting. And people were taking family pictures, and it was like, it was like the time I spent with the Dalai Lama. I was just like walking like this high above the ground. It was so great. Then, of course, we tore down the polling place. Larry and I get in his car. We take all the ballot stuff to the city hall in San Fernando, and Larry turns on the FM, and they announce who is the probable president-elect. And I went from this one experience of euphoria to a cold bath in the realities of American political life. But I will say, though, that that there's something about voting and the experience of voting, and I, like many of you know, I just vote online. I vote by mail. But there's something about that. That was like the last election. I worked a couple more polls after that for local elections, but there's something about that whole community experience that is really quite wonderful. It's like going to church. I mean, voting in person is like going to church in person, and voting by mail is like going to church on Zoom. And there are good reasons to do both, but there's something about that celebration of community across our differences, really. I mean, there were plenty of people from both parties at that Union Hall in Sylmar, and yet it was just a joyous day. And that, to me, is, in a sense, what voting is at its best and what America is at its best. So I retired in 2016, and in my last year or so at the cathedral, I was beginning to get a little jaundiced about the kind of, Mike will know this term, the uncritical Erastianism of the Episcopal Church. There was a way in which the cathedral was a little too smug about celebrating the powers that be the way they are. And one of my last meetings there, we were talking about our big veterans program. We had a big veterans initiative. We had a prayer breakfast. I actually had to stand and talk in the wings for 20 minutes with Senator Tom Cotton and have a polite conversation before he was our speaker at that prayer breakfast. And I props, I actually was able to do it. Also, Antonin Scalia, I had to sit next to Antonin Scalia once on a dais for 4 hours at a banquet. So I've got battle scars from my time in Washington. But and finally, we were talking about the Veterans Initiative and how great it is. And I raised my hand and I said, so when are we going to do the initiative honoring the draft resistors from the Vietnam War? And of course, they were outraged. And I said, you know, if we presume to call ourselves the National Cathedral, we've got to embrace the culture and all its complexity. And we can't just like pretend that the Vietnam War resistors didn't actually accomplish a lot in terms of our national life. And so retelling the story without mentioning the Vietnam War protests, and I feel a little that way today. I mean, I'm not going to get into the university politics, but I am not happy about what some of our university administrators have been doing in the United States. And I think, again, we forget the extent to which that popular, that student idealistic energy, which I remember from my own days at UC Berkeley in the late 1960s, I see in some of the young people today, and I think, again, it's an important part of our public life. We couldn't vote in those days because you couldn't vote until you were 21 in those days. And so one of the reasons we demonstrated so much is we had no other avenue. I think the folks today can vote, but I think they're doing something important that we need to hear and listen to, and not just get into a reflexive and punitive mentality. That's my only political comment of the morning. So I want to say just three things about Anglicanism and about voting and about why it's important. You know, there is a kind of, if you ever listen to Hacks on Tap, which is one of my favorite podcasts, Mike Murphy and David Axelrod and Robert Gibbs, but it's one of them will suddenly say, oh, you're getting all kind of League of Women Voters on me, which means you're getting a little too sentimental about American civics. And I'm not really sentimental about American civics, but I am a little sentimental about the role of the church in our public life, because you know, when I was young, one of the reasons I came into the church was frankly because of all the progressive ministers I got to know through the civil rights and anti-war movements when I was a college student. And so, and of course in those days people were saying the church shouldn't be involved in politics. And then suddenly, when Jerry Falwell discovered politics, we decided the church should be involved in politics. And I think the answer is that the church needs to be involved in our public life. You know, we are as Episcopalians the inheritors of the Church of England, which is the established church in the United Kingdom. But the whole idea of Anglicanism as I'm not going to call this a denomination, but as a faith tradition, is that there is no easy blue or red line between common law and common prayer. We are a nation, we are a tradition like the common law. The English common law is different than European common law. We make up our law out of precedents, out of experience. And we do our theologizing out of experience. We don't start with great theoretical precepts in Anglican theology. We start with the fact of our lived life together. We start with our liturgy, we start with our prayer life, we start with our pastoral life, we start with our public life, and we do our theology out of that experience, very much in the way that the English common law makes law out of precedent. And so there are two great ideas in early Anglicanism that we have held on to since the 16th century. One of them is the idea of what Elizabeth and the Reformers would have called Anglican comprehensiveness. Comprehend, hold together. We hold together both sides, the entirety. Just as I wanted the cathedral to hold together Vietnam veterans and draft resistors, so we as a church hold together, and the culture holds together, the wholeness of our lived political life. Now, in the Reformation days, Elizabeth, you remember Henry, when Henry died, his son, he had broken with Rome, but the church, as he led it until his death, was pretty much like the Roman Catholic Church, with just him rather than the Pope as the head guy, And then when his son, Edward VI, became king, the Protestant protectors moved us very quickly towards being a Reformed and Catholic church. And then, of course, Edward died. His older sister Mary became queen. She reverted, took us back to Roman Catholicism. They executed a bunch of our bishops and theologians. And then Mary died, and Elizabeth became queen. And Elizabeth made the decision, and there are ways in which people say, didn't Henry VIII start your church? And I always want to say, no, it's actually Elizabeth is in some ways the founder of our church. Because Elizabeth really came up with what we call the Elizabethan settlement. She came up with an idea of a church that would be both Reformed in its doctrine. We'd be Protestant in our doctrine. Clergy can be married. We read the Bible seriously and all those kinds of things. But we'd be Catholic in our forms and our liturgies. So we kept the three orders of ordained ministry. We kept our sacraments. We kept liturgical vestments. But we reformed much of our practice along Protestant lines. And Elizabeth was able to hold together the country that way, because you remember these disputes, Protestant Catholic disputes, were actually also national political disputes. A century later, there was the English Civil War, Oliver Cromwell, and we were back having, Protestants versus high Anglicans. And then that finally got solved in the late 17th century. But our genius as a church has been what I would call our comprehensiveness. We have no litmus test theologically. There are high church Episcopalians who believe in transubstantiation. They believe that the bread is the body and blood of Christ. There are low church Episcopalians who think it's a nice memorial, right? There are people all across that spectrum theologically. There is varying opinion about the Virgin Mary, about the virgin birth, about all kinds of things in our tradition. There used to be more diversity politically in our church. I mean, I remember when I was first in the church going to annual meetings at my home parish here in Tujunga, and there being arguments about the Vietnam War, where people would then afterwards have breakfast together and be fine. We're now in a period where people leave, mostly conservative people, tend to leave when they get angry, and we've had that happen twice, in the 70s over the ordination of women, in the early part of this century over same-sex justice issues. But yet there are still places where, there are still parishes, even in this diocese, where there is a range of political opinion. That's really been our tradition, is that we comprehend the fullness of our culture in our embrace. It doesn't mean we uncritically embrace all sides of that. I mean, we don't, we still hold on to our affirmations about women, anti-racism, and gender identity and sexual orientation, but we also allow that there's a wide range of understanding of how a person can orient themselves politically. So that's one idea. The second idea, and I think that's even maybe the more important idea, is what Richard Hooker, our great theologian at the end of the 16th century, called commonwealth. You know, if you've ever spent any time in Virginia or Massachusetts, or Pennsylvania, those states are actually called commonwealths. The Commonwealth of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's directly out of Hooker, because he talked about, for commonwealth means common good. And I think the most important thing for us as Anglicans, as inheritors of an Anglican tradition, is that our faith tradition embraces its role in the sustenance of the common good. We are here for the common good. We serve the common good. Politics, we believe, is to serve the common good. We do not see ourselves as, you know, one of many constituencies voting for our own ends, right? This is not the farmers versus the fishermen versus the whatever. We understand ourselves as advocating for the whole of the society, and that we have a stake in the common good. And that's why, it seems to me, it's what I used to say when I would get criticism in DC, but that say, well, why should the National Cathedral have a position on gun violence? And I would say because our faith tradition believes in the common good, and gun violence is working against the common good. It's working against public health. It's not about gun rights. It's not about any of those things. It's essentially about the deleterious effect of violence on a community. And you could say the same for our advocacy for same-sex marriage, for transgender justice, for anti-racism, for civil rights, for peace over the years. We are a tradition that has, in my day, has had both conscientious objectors and military chaplains. That's the nature of our faith tradition. We are not easily pigeonholed ideologically. We are comprehensive, and we care about the common good. And that's why it seems to me, and this is my last thing, and then I'll hand it over to Loren, that's why it seems to me that voting is so important for us. I mean, the presiding bishop has some good things to say about voting as a kind of civic duty. My point is that there is no easy, there's no, like as my friend Bonnie Perry says, there's no false choice between being a Christian and being a citizen. Being a citizen is actually part of our baptismal calling as a follower of Jesus. You know, Jesus lived fully in the society which he inhabited. He was critical of Roman occupation. He was critical, as in today's gospel, of of the religious establishment to the extent that it played intellectual games with people's lives. And just as Jesus fully lived in the culture and politics of his day, you and I are called to live in the culture and politics of ours. Remember that Jesus was crucified. He was not stoned. And crucifixion is what Romans did to political prisoners. It's what they did to Spartacus, if you ever saw the movie Spartacus. And so we follow someone who lived fully into the blessings and contradictions of what it means to live a public life in a society. And as followers of him, in our own weird Anglican way, we're called to live fully into our own culture. So I hope that wasn't too League of Women votery for you all. And I'm happy now to turn it over to Loren.
Thank you, Gary. Now, we were just thrilled when Gary said he was willing to come and talk to us because we knew we needed someone to inspire you. Maddie and I are sort of worker bees. And we're going to talk to you about the practical stuff that you can do to get involved. Some of you may think, because as Gary mentioned, our society is so divided now that getting involved in voting can be a scary thing because you're going to encounter people who will be very angry very quickly. But we have come up with some ways that you can get involved that are really easy and don't involve that kind of confrontation. So we've got several things that you can do. Interestingly enough, statistics have shown that the most effective way to get people out to the polls is through postcards rather than phone calls or texting. Postcards. So we have a whole bunch of postcard writing opportunities. Maddie has some little packets that you can pick up today if you want to write postcards. We have sign-up sheets over there at the table. We're going to have two major ways to do this. You can take a packet of postcards home, and we're working with other organizations, so you get the postcard, the addresses, and the script that you write on the postcards. Or postcard parties. If you want to host a postcard party at your house, and those are fun events, then we'll supply the postcards and all the information for that. You can invite other All Saints people, your neighbors, anyone to come in and sit and write postcards. And, another thing that we're going to try to do along with that is, because some of you, like me, are retired and we have kind of a restricted budget, so we don't have a lot of money to spend on stamps. But then there are people who have money and no time or just don't want to write postcards. So if you want to donate stamps, that's a good thing too. We'll put them to use, Then, okay, next thing. You can also volunteer to be a voter advocate. There are people who may have trouble with their ballots, people who need a ride to the polls or the voting box, the drop box. You can sign up to do that. You can attend a voter registration event. If you actually want to be out in a public spot signing people up to vote, we will organize that, something else that you can sign up with. And you can sign up for our new Peace and Justice WhatsApp group. And Maddie's going to explain a lot more about that. So I'm going to toss it to her now.
Okay. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Gary. Where do I want to start? I think what we based today on, and some of you may be familiar with this, is if you go to the Episcopal Church.org website, you'll see the Vote Faithfully Election Engagement Toolkit. So that's what we based our resource sheet on. But if you want the original sheet, you can go to that site and look for it. It was put together by the Office of Government Relations. And you'll see on our resource sheet that we have a quote from Michael Curry about Christian obligation to vote and getting souls to the polls. But there's also another quote that he has in here. Cast your vote not on a partisan basis, not based on your biases, but vote your values. Vote the values of human dignity and equality. Vote the values of the rock on which this country was built. Vote. So in some other circles, there are some people that will say voting gets you a C-. It just kind of, you barely pass if you just vote. So what we're here is to inspire you to get others involved and look at the opportunities you have to inspire people to get involved in getting people to vote. So what you'll see over there is the Faith and Get Out the Vote Action resources. Like I said, it's a smaller version of this. There's all sorts of links on this. You can even go on the Episcopal site there, and you can become an election activator. So you can really get involved. It depends on how much time you have. The resources that we've provided make it really easy, the sign-up sheets. And I will have those postcards afterward, and I have lots of more where they came from. So the packs that we're offering have 25 in them. There'll also be opportunities to write letters as well. The group that puts this together is it's a progressive pack. There's a number of them that have little groups like Vote Forward or Swing Left. I get our cards through Swing Left. Since it was started in the 4 years that they had started, they sent nearly 41 million postcards. And Lauren will tell you those percentages of actually inspiring people to vote. Now, if we're worried about partisan, politics, and we should be concerned about that, the cards that you'll be getting don't recommend candidates. We don't mention candidates. All about getting people to vote. Sometimes they'll go to first-time voters, just reminding them, hey, you signed up to vote, you registered. Here's your first election. Don't forget to get out there. It's very important to pay close attention to the script, though. We don't want to vary from that. And there's also instructions on what days to mail the postcards. We don't want to do them too early. The other thing that Lauren mentioned was our All Saints Church WhatsApp group. And we had hoped to have a slide. We don't have the slide, but I do have handouts. So what it is basically it's QR code that you can scan, and you're going to want to load the WhatsApp app on your phone. And it's basically just a messaging tool. It's just like Facebook Messenger, but it's WhatsApp, and it is just for this church peace and justice group. So what you will do is, if you sign up for it, you'll get action alerts for anything that you won't see in the liturgy that maybe happens too late to get either in the bulletin or get announced or something. And they can be for actions that are going to be out in the community. They could be to remind you today's the last day to register to vote. All of those sorts of things. So it's a safe group. It's a contained group, and it's really easy to sign up. So you can get one of these, scan this, and it's got the name of it. It is the ASC Rapid Response 1 group. So if you have any questions, though, you can just come to the action table, and we'll help you with all of that. I think that was kind of it. And did you want to talk about the signs?
So actually, can I just really quickly,
yeah.
and you can give them with the signs about the WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
So first of all, if you're not familiar with WhatsApp, but you are familiar with Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp is not annoying like Facebook Messenger. It's a really great, it's like Signal, it's like one of these other things. It really is very similar to just texting. But there can be a specific group. The other great thing about this is there's times where Chase or I or a couple other people, you've seen us on social media, we're out with the hotel workers at Unite Here Local 11 in front of the Hilton, and people are like, well, why didn't you let me know about that? And the truth is, we literally get a call early in the morning from a union organizer saying, there's going to be an action, can you show up? And until now, we haven't had a good way to get the word out to people. And so what this will do is something like that will happen, and you'll just get a text that will say, Unite Here Local 11 action, All Saints will be present, Hilton Hotel, 7 a.m. And you can ignore it if you want to, or you can show up, or you can forward it to someone else. But it's a way, if you just want to be informed about what's going on so you can pick and choose what you want to do, this is going to be a phenomenal tool. And so especially if time is one of the things that you have, please consider signing up for this. But then also, we've got about 70 people in this room. We have others who are participating with us online. Please tell other people about this. I would love to have a congregation where everyone is on this group because everyone wants to find a way to be active. And please know that this is such an important way, not just this year, but always for us to be living out our faith. So go ahead.
One thing I'd like to add too is, for some of you who are more experienced with, and you want to actually work for candidates, the church cannot organize something like that, but we can tell you where you can get connected. And Maddie and I are both happy to have private conversations about that, about what groups you could get connected with, because there are plenty of things in California. If you want to do precinct work, you can do it, and we'll help you get connected, but it won't be an official church thing because we don't do that.
Right, so this can be and I'm looking at Susan Russell in the back, who is our resident expert on this. This will be our annual or more often announcement about something called the Johnson Amendment, which this church is incredibly familiar with from its past, which is we're a 501c3, which is we're a nonprofit organization, and what that means politically is that we cannot endorse or give aid, real or in kind, to candidates. I can't say, vote for Bart Simpson. So I can say that, but I can't say, I can't insert the name there. And that's because, if you could, then we're using church resources which have been given which you get a tax break for giving for a political cause. And it basically turns contributions to a political campaign to a person into something that's tax deductible. What we can do is say what Gary said, which is vote your values, and here are the values of this community. Vote. We can and we do every Sunday take positions on ballot initiatives. What we cannot do is endorse candidates. So what that also means is, like we tell our ushers and greeters, especially during election season, you can't wear a campaign button for a person. I can wear, and you can certainly wear it too, a Unite Here Local 11 button to show support for a union, but we cannot in any official way endorse a candidate. Well, we can, but then we risk the Justice Department suing us and threatening to take away our nonprofit status. So, we're going to have an amazing event here a week from Thursday night. That is, Brad Whitford is going to moderate it. It's going to be an amazing panel from Americans United for Separation of Church and State, talking about how do we combat the rise of Christian nationalism. What you will not hear us saying is naming candidates who are Christian nationalist candidates by name and saying, please don't vote for this person. But we will have a conversation about the real incredible danger to our country that the rise of Christian nationalism is, and that's our role. So, go ahead.
Another thing too, we can tell you how people have voted. And there's a good website called Courage Score that tells you how all these various elected officials and candidates, how they have voted on things in the past. So that can help you vote your values by finding out what candidates are promoting. And that's, okay, we can do that, just like we promote actions at the action table on issues. We can tell you how, you can check on how people have voted. So, any questions?
Signs.
Oh, signs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, at the last election, we had all these signs printed up, and we passed them out after we did a march to the polls. And so, we're changing some of them into I will vote signs. You're welcome to pick them up. You can take the ones that are here. We're going to have them available all summer. Maddie and I, and probably Patrick, are going to be at the action table with get out the vote stuff. From now through the election, we will have more signs, we will have more handouts, more opportunities for you to do stuff. So stop by the action table. Yeah.
One thing we mentioned, or didn't mention in the sign-up sheets, there's a number of them, but we're going to have events to register voters. So if you want to sign up to attend one of those events, for example, it'll be a couple hours. You don't have to do the entire shift, maybe a half hour at the flea market or the Paseo or PCC. We're going to have just straight get out the vote registration events, and those are really fun because you meet people who haven't registered and you help them, and it's really a neat thing to do.
Do you have any guidance on judges and how to make a decision about judges? That's always the part that makes me really crazy. Is how do I know who to vote for without going to a partisan thing? Or the LA Times makes endorsements, but those are always iffy to me. So I'm just wondering about voting for judges. Is there a reliable source to go to for those choices?
You go ahead, Laura, I want to hear your answer.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've struggled with in getting information about judges. I mean, we do have some members here that are public defenders and an ADA. I usually talk to them and ask them, but we haven't actually had a handout on that because I wasn't sure if it was getting too partisan, so I don't.
Right, I think what we can do is talk about resources. Obviously, we can't say vote for this judge. For example, we did a forum in the last election. There were a group of public defenders who were running for judgeships. One of them is our own Elizabeth Lashley Haynes. And we had a forum talking about, what is it about, first of all, how public defenders are underrepresented on the bench, but then also sort of what sort of unique things do we bring? And we didn't, so we gave a forum for that. What I would say in terms of judges, there are some resources out there. I don't know off the top of my head. The greatest resource that I always go to is, I see someone raising their hand back there, so I'm going to walk towards you, is really Elizabeth Lashley Haynes. Every election cycle, if you can follow her on social media, she will give her own thoughts, which I do not say should replace your own thoughts, but I know that her wisdom has been something that has absolutely informed my actions. And she shares some really wonderful resources, and where there are resources, I feel like we can share those with you. Did you have a resource or something you wanted to add?
I use the LA County Bar. I think that's the site that I go to because, is it someone? Yeah. So LA County Bar, and all it says is for each candidate, well qualified, qualified, or not qualified. So at least you have some guidance there.
And we also have other parishioners. I know Juan Mejia and Diana Carbajal Mejia have worked in the district attorney's office and the prosecutor's office, and they're really well informed about people who are running for judges.
Thanks, Mike. Susan Russell, having just been decreed an expert on the Johnson Amendment. Now I'm going to have to go look that up and refresh my memory. And I would say Elizabeth Lashley Haynes, again, there is, our public defenders have come up trying to end a long-term preferential option for district attorneys. And again, in the spirit of what the Reverend Dr. Dean Gary Hall, canon, are you a canon too? I think, how many titles can one guy stand? Look at him there.
They always give those instead of salary raises.
Who taught me everything I know about Anglican polity. Standing in that place of Anglican comprehensiveness, if we're going to vote our values, we want our bench to be equally representative of those who have experience as district's attorney, but as well as public defenders. And at this point, public defenders are massively underrepresented. So in terms of the Johnson Amendment, including a list of recommendations, if that is a value you want to vote, here's just data on how you can fill that out. So that's the kind of information we're going to be doing. And then because I have the microphone and we have like 4 more minutes, I want to slip in a quick 30-second commercial for a book group I'm planning to lead a little later in the election cycle. It's by a book that was recently published by Church Publishing by a longtime friend, Michael Hopkins, and it's called Call to Action, and it's short, it's accessible, it's deeply grounded in our baptismal covenant, and it unpacks both the how and whys we act out our life in faith. So if you're looking for something positive to do with a community to discuss not just the craziness going on in the news, but the foundational values we're going to be trying to live out, keep an eye out, hit me up, and I'm hoping to have that come out probably July or August after we get General Convention done. Thank you so much. I'm here all week. Try the salad bar.
Got David over here. I'm going to squeeze right through. Excuse me.
League of Women Voters has been a source of unbiased but informative knowledge on all levels of candidates, and they have positions for volunteering for offering services in that area.